We're on the Mishnah, Beis and Beis 22b. From Shimon Omer, Ein Schus Toila b'Mayim Hamarim. Shimon's opinion is there is no possibility of a schus, a merit, pushing away the effects or delaying the effects of drinking the water. Why? Because if you say that a merit could delay the effects of the water, so then what happens? You're basically you're negating the effectiveness of the water. People will be less afraid to drink the water. And not only that, and worse off, that you're arguing that all the women who drank are not necessarily tahiris. Maybe they had a merit that delayed their penalty. So therefore, it can't be that the Torah would say that the schus would be able to delay the effects. So we have a few compromised positions. Rabbi says, a schus a merit will work to delay the effect. However, what happens is she does not beget children. She doesn't sort of look good. Her beauty is degraded. The degradation of her beauty continues until eventually she dies. Eventually she dies of the same death that a Sotah would typically die from. Okay.
We're on 22b.
22b, and now we're 4 lines in the bottom of the page.
Okay. Ella?
22b, ba'is misa. Okay, now we get into a bunch of technicalities, and then we go off subject. Okay.
I was surprised.
Nitmis minchasa ad shalikacha b'kli. What happens if her korban became tamei before it was put into a kli sharos? So now a mincha is you sanctify the flour. Doesn't become an actual sacrifice until you put it into a vessel with the intention, a vessel of the temple with the intention of bringing it as a korban. So therefore, if it becomes tamei before it got to the vessel, temple's vessel, harei gechol hamenacha, it's v'tifta. It has the same halacha as all other menachos, and at that stage, it's v'tifta. You redeem it. So if the mincha is tamei, it's no longer you can no longer bring the korban, so you can redeem it, and the money you use to buy a new mincha. Similarly, if you have a korban, it gets a mum, right? You have a korban oila, it has a blemish now. You can redeem it, buy a new korban, and bring the new korban. Okay, the emisha kachabakli. What happens once you put it into the vessel of the temple? So then now it's become a korban already. There's no way to redeem it, and therefore it's burnt. Okay, once we're on the subject of burning minachas, of burning a korban mincha. Mincha again is an offering of typically flour and water or oil and frankincense. Although some minachas have other ways of being brought. These are examples of people whose minachas, whose korban minchas are burned. If a woman says, so they prepare the mincha, they're about to bring it, and the woman says, "I'm tamei." In other words, she admits that she had an adulterous relationship. Or we have witnesses that testify that they saw that she engaged in, she copulated with another man, that the man who she was warned about. Or a woman who says, "I'm not drinking." Or the husband decides he doesn't want to push his wife to drink the waters. Or so 1 second. This is another scenario. I think it came up briefly before, which is that if the husband does kinoi, then she secludes herself as stira. The husband is now prohibited to his wife. Now they're traveling from wherever they live to Jerusalem to undergo the Sotah process. If the husband is intimate with his wife in that period, so then the water will no longer, it won't investigate her sin. Meaning, even if she's guilty, the water will not kill her.
Is it, Rabbi?
Sorry?
Repeat that last.
If if a man was intimate with his wife after she's committed stira, meaning she was warned and then she secluded herself, and they were on their way to Jerusalem to investigate whether or not she's excited by drinking the water, and the husband's intimate with his wife at that point, then the water does not investigate her, meaning even if she's guilty, it will not kill her. What? The nikah ha'ish me'ha'avain. It's only if the man is clean of sin. The man is not clean of sin, it will not investigate her. Because the man,
So his
sin was he cohabitated her when he was prohibited to. Right.
Oh, all right, okay.
Very subtle.
Okay, so that's
Good guy.
yeah. Okay. V'shabayla bo'ala b'derech. If the husband was intimate with her on the roads. Okay. These are all examples of menachos that are burned. And now we go completely off subject. It's a general rule, minchas kayin, if a kayin brings a mincha, Kollel toktar. The sacrament is completely burned. So the mincha is put on. Typically, a mincha, you bring only the frankincense, or a small amount of the mincha is put on the altar to be burned. The mincha of a kayin is different. Everything is burned. The entire mincha is burned. Okay, so therefore we go v'kol hanasuas l'kahanim. Any woman who's married to a kayin, minchasayam nisrafais. Their menachos are burned. Why are their menachos burned? Because a kayin's mincha is burned, and this mincha is sort of in between. To some extent, it's her mincha because it's coming to atone for her sin. To some extent, it's the kohen's mincha because the kohen is her husband and actually owns the mincha, and therefore it has to be burned. We'll discuss this in more detail when we get to the Gemara. How do we balance? How do we burn the whole thing? Are you even allowed to burn more than God demands you burn? Over here, we're saying it's sort of an intermediate situation. It belongs to the kayin to a certain extent, but it belongs to his wife to a certain extent.
This is just a completely different subject.
It's a separate component.
Include any.
Yeah. First, we discussed. The first part of the Mishnah was the schus, the merit.
Right.
Second part of the Mishnah was when you burn her mincha. And now we go on to a different subject. Another example of a person whose mincha is burned is a woman married to a kohen. And we'll discuss it more in the Gemara. Bas Yisrael shenisis l'kohen minchasa nisrefes. If a regular Jewish woman is married to a kohen, her mincha is burnt. The kohenes shenisis l'Yisrael, a kohenes that's married to Yisrael, minchasa ne'achelas. 1 second. If a kohen is married to a Yisrael, if you have a woman who's a kohen who's married to Yisrael, so her mincha is eaten. And the Gemara explains, Ma bein kohen l'kohenes. What is the halachic difference between a male kohen and a female kohen? Minchas kohenes, the mincha of a female kohen, ne'achelas is eaten. Uminchas kohen, but the mincha of a kohen, ein ne'achelas, it is not eaten. Kohenes mischalalas. The kohen ain't mischal. A woman who's a kohen, if she engages in a relationship that qualifies as a zona literally means prostitute, but it doesn't in context, it means a prohibited relationship. So if she engages in a prohibited relationship, then she's mischalalas. She becomes invalidated to marry a kohen. For example, if a kohenes has an affair with a non-Jewish man, she can never marry a kohen again. She's called an isha zaina. She's prohibited to marry a kohen. However, if a kohen goes ahead and marries a divorced woman, a male kohen, the male kohen is not prohibited. If he divorces her and marries another kosher girl, regular girl, that's not a divorcee, his children are valid kohanim. He can never nullify his status as a kohen, even if he marries a divorcee. Kohenes mitam l'meisim, a female kohen is allowed to become tamei. Ve'ein kohen mitam l'meisim, but a male kohen cannot become tamei to a dead body. Kohen oichel b'kochi kochim. A male Kohen can eat the sacrifices of kochi kochim. These are the sacrifices that whose their meat you're only allowed to eat in the azara. That means in the temple grounds, quite literally. So it has to be on the temple mount, and not just on the mount, but really in the azara, which is the sanctified area. Only a Kohen can eat these sacrifices. A female Kohen cannot eat these sacrifices. By the way, Yisrael can't either. Yisrael does not eat any sacrifices that are kochi kochim. Kochi kochim are only eaten by Kahanim. There are many sacrifices called kochim kalam. These would be the korban Pesach or korban Shlomim that are eaten in the entire city, and those the Kahanis can partake from as well. Okay. Those.
So here we're talking about
Nothing to do with
tradition
Sotah.
of a Sotah.
We started off with an instance of a Sotah. Then we
Right.
start talking about a Sotah who is married to a Kohen.
Right.
And now we're talking about the difference between a Kohen and a Kohenes.
Still involved with Sotah.
No.
No, it doesn't. Oh,
No, but all these examples were nothing to do with Sotah.
Oh, okay.
So
All right.
1 second.
Yeah.
You know, the question of whether or not they become a Kollel is not really a question of Sotah. It's not a question of Sotah, right? The question here is whether a female Kohen marries someone prohibited to her, versus if a male Kohen marries someone prohibited to him.
Okay.
And there are actually different types of people, because who's prohibited to a male Kohen? A divorcee. Isha Grusha. Who's prohibited to a female Kohen? Anyone who's prohibited to any Jew. There's nothing unique about a female Kohen, right? So it would be a non-Jew. It would be one of the relatives, etc. Married. Yeah. No, that's it. Okay.
Right. Right. If she's been dieting, is it a diet soda then?
Yeah.
That one's for you, Charles.
You've been waiting all day for that. Oh,
Actually, I
weird.
just thought of it in the last 3 seconds, which makes it all the more terrifying.
Okay.
Okay.
Ma bein ish liisha. So now we spoke about the difference between a male and a female Kohen. What's the difference between a male and female Yisrael? Okay, the halacha is when a Jewish man becomes a mitzvah, he needs to grow his hair and rend his garments. Perea uparam. Ve'ein ha'isha peras uparemes. A woman who's a mitzvah does not have to rend her garments or grow her hair long. Ha'ish madaras b'nai b'nazir. We've seen this not that long ago. A man can make his son a nazir. Ve'ein ha'isha madaras b'nai b'nazir. But a woman cannot declare her son a nazir. Ha'ish megalech al naziros aviv. A man can, if a man is a nazir and his father is a nazir and his father dies, he can use his father's karbonis for his naziros. This is a unique halacha in nazir. Ve'ein ha'isha megalechas al naziros aviyah. But a woman and her father do not have the same halacha. She has to bring her own set of karbonis. She cannot use her father's karbonis. Ha'ish mekaylish es bitoi. A man can marry off his daughter before she's mature. Ve'ein ha'isha mekaylish es bitoi. A woman cannot marry off her daughter. Ha'ish meicher es bitoi. A man can sell his daughter as a slave. This sort of slave is really a combination of a maidservant / mistress, because there is a component of marriage here. The master is able to marry her or is able to marry her off to his son. Ve'ein ha'isha meicheres es bita. But a woman cannot sell her daughter. Ha'ish niskal aram. If a man is convicted of a crime whose penalty is capital punishment by stoning, he is stoned naked. Ve'ein ha'isha niskalas aruma. But a woman is not stoned naked. Furthermore, at the end of once he's killed from stoning, he's hung. In other words, the hanging here is not to kill him. The hanging is hanging a dead man. Ha'ish nitla, a man is hung. Ve'ein ha'isha nitlas, a woman is not hung. Ha'ish nimkar b'gnei. If a man steals and he cannot afford to pay back, he's sold as a slave, and that the money from the sale is used to pay back his theft. Ve'ein ha'isha nimkares b'gnei, but a woman is not sold if she steals and she can't pay back. Okay. Let's see the Gemara. Torah Rabbanan. Kollel nesuas lekahuna min chayseim nisrafis.
On 23.
23a.
All right, thank you.
Kollel nesuas lekahuna min chayseim nisrafis. Anyone married to a kohen, their menachos are burnt. Ketzad. How does that work? Kehenes levia v'Yisraelis shenisas lekayin. Whether it doesn't make a difference to the status of a woman, whether she's a Yisraelis, she's a regular woman, she's a Levia, she's a Levi, or a Kehenes, she's a Kohen, and she gets married to a male Kohen. Shenisas lekayin. V'ein minchasa ne'achelas. Her mincha is not consumed. Is not eaten. Because he has a portion in the mincha, and the rule is, like we said before, the mincha of a Kohen is not eaten. However, the mincha of a Kohen is burnt completely. The mincha of a woman married to a Kohen cannot be completely burnt because she yeah.
This mincha from the coin, are we talking about a specific kind of mincha brought for a particular reason, or is just still any mincha from a coin? I'm also just wondering why his is always burnt and other people's aren't.
So we'll discuss that more in detail. Let's say for now that we're talking about a minchas nedava, which means a voluntary mincha.
Okay, all right.
An obligatory mincha is a little more complicated. We'll get to that. We'll get to that in a moment. Okay, we're talking about okay. Hold on a second. Okay. And this Bryce here is not necessarily talking about a mincha site. It could easily be talking about a mincha of voluntary mincha.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay. The Torah says that a mincha of a kohen is completely consumed and it is not eaten. There's a prohibition to eat it.
At all times, or just? Well, I guess you're going to get that a little later.
No, very simple. So as soon as it's brought as a mincha, as soon as you put it into a vessel, it becomes prohibited to be eaten. The entire thing, it's like an oila. The typical mincha, only a small amount of the mincha is eaten. I'm sorry. I meant only a small amount of it is burnt.
Okay.
Most of it is eaten.
All right.
The mincha of a kohen, the sacrifice is burn the whole thing.
I see. So you're going to find out, is it always, we're going to find down the line? Not
so we're talking about, let's start with the minchas nedava. So
right.
Voluntary mincha is completely burnt, and that's part of the sacrifice.
Okay.
The sacrifice is take the mincha and burn it.
Okay.
Now there's also a prohibition to eat it. In
Right.
a situation of a woman married to a kohen, she's bringing the mincha, but he owns it.
Mm-hmm.
So we can't eat it because ultimately he owns it, and the mincha of a kohen cannot be eaten. However, we also can't bring the whole mincha as a carbon because she owns the mincha. And it's only the mincha of a kohen that's burnt, not the mincha of a woman married to a kohen.
Okay.
So you're sort of stuck. It's a problem. What do you do with the other half? So you sacrifice the part that you usually sacrifice, but what do you do with the rest?
She's got part ownership in a sense, quotation marks here. So
Well, she's bringing it's her carbon. Even if she doesn't own it, she's bringing it.
Right.
Okay. Now, there's another thing I should point out, which is that you can't sacrifice that should not be sacrificed. There's a prohibition. The Torah says we don't sacrifice chametz and honey. However, the framing of that is loisaktiru mimenu. From these, mimenu seems to be an extra word, and from mimenu we learn that anything that isn't fit for sacrifice is not allowed to be sacrificed.
Soar gum, right?
Sorry. What's the
soar?
Soar is chametz.
The chametz kikot soar. Chametz.
Correct.
They're not. It refers to chametz and soar. They're not the same. They're the same thing.
So chametz would be ready to consume, and soar would be that in second. I think soar would probably be that isn't ready to consume.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I don't know what that is.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, it's not. It's actually not. In this case, it's the same thing. It says say also chametz. You shouldn't make a chametz because you can't bring it out as a carbon. He calls sa'ar because chametz won't work. So sa'ar here means directly chametz.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Sorry.
So now we have a problem here. We have the mincha of a woman of a woman married to a kohen. In a certain sense, you cannot eat it, but you can't bring it as a sacrifice either, because ultimately it's not the sacrifice of a kohen; it's a sacrifice of his wife, and there's no obligation for the entire thing to be burnt. So what do you do with it? What do you do with the other half? You can't eat it, but you can't bring it as a sacrifice. Okay, you can't eat it because she has a portion of it. But you can't bring it as a sacrifice because it's her sacrifice. Ella, what do you do? The kaimetz, which is the regular part that's sacrificed, that's burnt, that one is consumed by the flames. Vashirayim, the leftovers, craven ba'atzman, they're brought as a separate sacrifice. So Gemara says, what do you mean? How can you do that? Ikri kan kol shehu mimenu leishim, harayu b'bal taktiru. We learn that anything that isn't supposed to be sacrificed is prohibited to be sacrificed. So how can you sacrifice the rest of her mincha? So the Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Yehudah Breder of Shimon ben Pazi, Demasikul b'shem eitzim. Rabbi Yehudah posits that the solution is you say as follows: if this is considered the mincha of the kohen, this should be a sacrifice, the rest of the mincha. And if not, it's the mincha of the kohen's wife. So then these should be like wood. It should be like wood. So in other words, there's an obligation to fuel the mizbeach, and constantly in the temple they were always putting wood on the mizbeach. Anyone remembers from I believe it was in I think it was in either my Cotton or Tinus. So we learned about I think it was Tinus, the end of Tinus. We learned about a celebration day that they brought when they would bring a carbon of woods. They bring wood. They put the wood that was cut for the temple. They bring it as a sacrifice.
Wasn't it the one family that brought it?
One family brought. One family had like the schus gemara to bring it.
They had the wood concession.
Yeah. Okay. So you bring it as wood, and this goes to the opinion Rabbi Elazar, like the opinion of Rabbi Elazar. The Tanya Rabbi Elazar, Reimer, the reich nichayach yatamayla avamayla atal shemetzim. Rabbi Elazar holds this, that you're prohibited from sacrificing something that shouldn't be sacrificed. It's only when it's brought as a sacrifice. But when you bring it as wood, it's not a sacrifice, and therefore you don't violate the prohibition. Here's the solution?
Yeah.
Okay. So the Gemara says, Hanicha l'Rabbi Elazar d'Islehai Svara. This makes sense according to Rabbi Elazar, who holds of this difference, that you can bring something as wood and not as a carbon. El Rabban de Leslu Hai Svara Mike Lamemer. But the rabbis disagree. They say if it's part of a carbon, you can't bring it as wood, and therefore you're not allowed to sacrifice it. So what do you do with it? So Gemara says the Abdilu Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon. You do like Rabbi Elazar, the son of Reb Shimon. The Tanya Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon Aimer. Hakaimetz Karav Ba'atzmai Vashirayim Mispazrim Al Beis Hadeshim. The ash, the leftovers are put on the place where they typically put ash. In other words, it's disposed of without
Not on the mizbeach.
without being
No
consumed in his back, and without being eaten.
No sanctification of it.
Yeah. Okay, 1 second.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Okay, now the opinion of Reb Shimon, what is this? Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon is clearly a minority opinion. But the Gemara points out, Vafilu Rabbana le pligi alad Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon el b'minchas chayta shel kayin, the basa krova, the basa krovi. Abba baha Vafilu Rabbana right. Let me explain this. A minchas nedava, a voluntary mincha. What you do is you put the levine on top of the mincha. You take the whole mincha in a bowl. You don't typically take out kaimitz, which is a small measurement. But the mincha of a kayin, you take the whole bowl and you dump it on top of the fire. So that's how you burn the whole thing. It seems to be pretty easy. However, with regard to the mincha of the mincha of a sinner. So according to the rabbis, you take a kaimitz in other words, you do the mincha like you do for a regular Yisrael,
Mhm.
and then you sacrifice both the kaimitz and the rest of it in two separate bowls. And Rabbi Elazar Shimon says no. You bring the kaimitz in one bowl, and the rest of it you dump you dispose of it in the garbage, effectively. So the Gemara says the rabbis only disagree with Reb Shimon because they hold the other half of the mincha could be brought as a sacrifice, but they'd agree to Reb Shimon where you can't, like a woman, like the wife of a Kohen who's bringing a mincha, because it can't be brought because maybe she's the one bringing the korban, and it's in the category of something that isn't fit for sacrifice that we'd be burning, because it's her mincha and you're allowed to eat her mincha, but you're not really allowed to eat his mincha, so you can't really eat it. Therefore, they'd agree to Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon that it would be disposed of on top of the pile of ash. I feel Rabbanan mind you they'd agree to Reb Shimon and you would dispose of that mincha.
Part is burned on the altar, part is scattered in the ash.
A small amount is burnt, and the rest of it is dumped in the trash. Yeah. So what's unique to this pile is that it's inside the temple. So you don't have. So in other words, typically a sacrifice you're not allowed to bring outside. Pile of ash is inside the temple, and it's also tahar. It's also you won't make it impure by dumping it there. It's sort of a religious trash bin.
Did that pile ever diminish?
There's a whole discussion on that. Whether it
Oh,
happened
yeah,
whether it was miraculous or whether they had to empty it manually. In the first temple, miraculously, it just disappeared. And it should be convenient, especially in Portland, they charge for typically garbage.
And separated in proper bins too.
Yeah. But I think in the second temple they had to, so there were periods where everything was useless and worthless and everything was nothing there, and they'd remove it. Part of the temple service every day was to take 2 shovels of ash and put it there. Okay, let's continue. Bas Yisrael Hanasua. If you have a woman who's married to a Kohen. 1 second. Yeah, okay. So the question is, my timer. In other words, you have a woman who's married to a Kohen, her mincha is burnt. Why is it burnt? Why can't it be eaten? To Amar Kra, because the pasuk says, "Kol minchas Kohen kol tia loy seichel." The mincha of a Kohen kol tia will be completely consumed on the altar. Loy seichel, you're not allowed to eat it. This is the mincha of a Kohen, v'loy kohenes, but not the mincha of a woman married to the mincha of a Kohen, but not the mincha of a kohenes, a woman who's a Kohen who's married to a Yisrael. Her mincha is eaten. So a small amount is consumed by fire, the rest of it's consumed by people, by humans. Okay, kohenes mischalalas ve'ein kohen ein mischal. A woman who's a kohenes, she can become invalidated to marry a Kohen. However, a Kohen status will never disappear. You know, and how do we know this? The Amar Kra, the pasuk says, "V'leichal zari ba'amav." If a Kohen marries a Kohen should not marry a divorcee, lest he invalidate his sons as Kohanim, which means zari mischal v'hu ein mischal. His sons become invalidated; he does not. Okay. Kohenes matama, a woman who's a Kohen is allowed to become tamei. My tama, Amakra Emerald Kohanim b'nei Aaron. Speak to the Kohanim, the sons of Aaron. They are prohibited to become tamei. B'nei Aaron, the sons of Aaron, v'lei b'nei Aaron, but not the daughters. The daughters are allowed to become tamei. Kohen oichel b'kotche kotchem. A Kohen eats these sacrifices that are only consumed inside the temple. V'chsiv kol zochar b'nei Aaron yichlena. Any male of Aaron's children and of Kohanim will consume it. Ma bein ishli. So what's the difference between a man and a woman? Tanar Rabbanan, we learned ish enli ala ish isha minayin. We're talking about mitzvah here. How do we know that a woman could become a mitzvah as well? The Torah talks about a mitzvah in a sort of a neutral term, so therefore it includes both a male and female mitzvah. So why does the Torah say a male mitzvah? A man. The other law of mitzvah, what's the other law? Ish pereo parim. God of you perumim v'roisha yeperua, meaning that his clothes are rent, and his hair is grown long. Sort of like a mourner. Only a man has those laws. A woman does not have those laws. If anyone remembers back in Nazir, we learned that ish madaras b'nei b'nazir v'ein isha madaras b'nei b'nazir. Only a man can make a son a nazir. Amr of Yochanan, how do we know this? Halachihi b'nazir. It's one of the many halachah l'meshir that we got to in Mesechus Nazir. Ha'ish megalech al naziris aviv ve'ein isha megaleches al naziris aviyah. A man is allowed to use his father's sacrifices. A woman, in the case where they're both nazirim, and a woman cannot. Amr of Yochanan says halachihi b'nazir. It's a halacha by nazir. A man can marry off his daughter before she's mature, and a woman cannot marry off her daughter. How do we know this? Because the source that we know that a man can marry off his daughter is where the man proclaims in front of the court, "I've given my daughter to this man." It's actually in the context of sort of a proceedings relating to his daughter's potential adultery. And he says, "I'm the one who married off my daughter." Evidently, he's able to marry off his daughter. But we only see that a man can do it and not a woman. Ha'ish niskal aram. A man is stoned naked. My taima v'rogmu oisai. You stone him. Now, what does that mean? You stone him? Does it mean that only men are stoned? Maybe it means that that the capital punishment of stoning is only given to men. So the Gemara says that can't be. My oisai. What does that mean? Oisai. In other words, it's a male description. Maybe it means that only a man is stoned. That can't be. It speaks of bringing out that man or that woman to be stoned. So that can't be. When you stone him, it's oisai. You stone just him, but like susa without his clothes. But like susa. But when you stone her, when you stone a woman, she is not stoned without clothes. Ha'ish nitla, ve'ena isha nitlas. A man is hung after he's killed, and a woman is not hung at all. My time, amakrovit v'salisa oisai al eitz. You hang him on a tree. Oisai him, v'loy oisa, but not her. Ha'ish nimkar b'gneva sai ve'ena isha nimkeres b'gneva sa. A man is sold if a man steals and cannot afford to pay back. He's sold as a slave, and the proceeds of the sale are used to pay back the theft. If a woman steals and can't pay back, she is not sold as a slave. My time, what's the source? Amakra, the pasuk says, "V'nimkar b'gneva asai." He sold for his robbery, his theft. B'gneva asai, for his theft. V'lo b'gneva sa, but not for her theft. That concludes the third parak. I'll stop here. Okay, see you ready tomorrow afternoon. Next parak is a little more complicated. A couple of complicated gemaras.
We're ready.
Yeah.
Shalom.
The next one is also complicated. The next two parak are complicated. Yeah, toward the end of the parak, it's very interesting stuff.